Welcome to Yeukai Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host, Yeukai Kechidori.
Awesome. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We are so excited for you because what you're about to discover is going to truly change everything. In fact, we're going to be talking about the frequently asked questions around this area. You know, sometimes you just need a straightforward answer to a question that you may have. And today, we just have the right expert to share with you what works today. And this is based not only from just theory, but from experience that spans over a very long period of time, and the proof in the customers and the testimonials that are on the website that this stuff we're going to be talking about actually works. Now, before I introduce our guest here today, I want to remind you to go into the community and get ready to ask any questions that you may have around this topic, because, you know, these times we have on the podcast, we can only cover so much, but the rest of the conversation, the real conversation or in-depth conversation happens in the community. So you want to go into the community and ask those questions. There will be a link at the bottom of this page for you to ask those questions. Now, back to our guest. Incredible. Thanks again for joining us here. Truly appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to us and be generous with your knowledge. Now, for those who are yet to discover you or who haven't met you or discovered some of the things that you do, could you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your background, your education, and your experience in this area? And while you're at it, let people know whether you have been an overnight success, which I know there isn't, and if you haven't, what has worked for you over the years for you to become the expert that you are today?
Thank you for hosting me today. Just to give you a little bit more of context about my life, I want to tell you there are three different parts of my life that were necessary to be where I am today. The first thing is that I am an engineer, so I am the kind of person who loves science to justify anything. I love numbers. I think that data is necessary in order to prove or disapprove certain concepts. So I studied engineering in the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, which is somewhere in Switzerland. I grew up, by the way, in Switzerland. The second thing is that I have been working in the same corporation for 17 years before jumping into entrepreneurship. So in this corporation, I was responsible for corporate strategy and innovation. And after that, in fact, I decided 4 years ago to jump ship and go into my interest of behavioral science and put into practice with companies that want to be creative, that want to create, in fact, a thriving work culture. And the reason why, in fact, I went into that direction is that there were two things that drove that interest into work cultures. First of all, back then I was in the initial transformation team of that company. So they embarked, maybe 8 years ago, they embarked in a major transformation because they were changing the number of products that they were commercializing. There was much more technology involved. It was the first time that this company was selling, in fact, technology. And it wasn't that easy, in fact, to be in this initial transformation team responsible, in fact, to drive transformation initiatives of all around the world. So we were a small team of 10 people, in fact, to deal with the plan of the rollout of the transformation for the whole company, which had approximately 65,000 people all around the world. And what I noticed is that despite the amounts of investments in technology and training, we had major hiccups with employees' motivation, productivity, and engagement during these times of change. And there is more to that. And the second part of the story about why I changed I moved out from the corporate world and to work in these cultural aspects of corporation, how important it is because I had a personal story with mental health in that corporation. And that challenge came from the fact that there was a misalignment between the company culture and my individual values. And I think that these two things, the failure of corporations during the times of transformation and also the impact on mental health of the employees, drove me to start assessing how can we make that the brain, to make it easy for employees, in fact, to don't have all these challenges with motivation, with learning new things, with embracing change as they have now. And that came with my interest into behavioral science, and I spent quite a lot of time researching. I remember that I mentioned to you that I'm a kind of, yes, I love digging on stuff. So I needed data, I needed science in order to understand how we can use brain science in order to help employees embrace change.
Awesome. Thank you. Absolutely appreciate that. Now, in my journey, I've got to be honest with you. I've had to overcome a lot of roadblocks, from right at the beginning of my business journey. Even up to now, I consistently have to overcome these roadblocks. I want to talk to you about roadblocks. What roadblocks did you face earlier on, and how did you overcome them?
As you said, there is many roadblocks in the journey of being an entrepreneur. But I guess I have to pick up something, right? So I'm going to pick up two major things. One of them is about the value proposition. When you explain the value proposition of helping people get the psychological resources, the motivation, in fact, to implement, to use what they learn in order to change behaviors at work, it wasn't easy to explain the concept of psychological resources, which means, do I have the mental capacity to make things happen? Basically, imagine that, for instance, people can read a lot about, I don't know, emotional intelligence, but to put it in practice, it's not that easy. And it happened to me during my corporate career. And to explain that, and to explain also the dimension of the well-being that people should acquire, it wasn't well perceived at the beginning. So I had to change a little bit my value proposition when I was pitching to corporations, because well-being is something like they say, what's the impact? What's the value of that? So I had to transform my value proposition into something that is more about driving the productivity of people. So I was still embedding the concept, all of this research that I have done in terms of psychological resources, what motivates people to learn, and what is the path that has a less friction in the brain in order that people not only acquires the knowledge but puts it into action. So there was a little bit of pivoting, if you want, to explain that to people in human resources, so that they get to believe that this is something that is going to work. The second part of my roadblock, I would say, is about the use of technology. And the thing is that putting together a data-driven approach to measure the impact of our programs with technology wasn't easy. Many things go wrong when you're using technology, when you are developing a tech product. And also you need to, on top of all of these bugs that you have in an app, then you need to also to start raising money to make it happen. And that was a huge learning gap that I didn't, it was quite difficult to cover, how to raise money, how to convince investors about the impact of your technology, and it was tough. And you pay a price mentally, because it's tiring. It is something that where you need to acquire new skills, and you need to convince people, and sometimes even though you believe that you are right when you're explaining, it doesn't resonate with the person in front. That were, I would guess, that was the major challenges. So one of them is to convince them that about the impact of well-being into how it can help people to learn and acquire new behaviors, to change behaviors if required. And the second thing is about you need technology to scale it up to with a full organization that can be thousands of people. And it's not easy, in fact, to scale up a tech product.
Yes. Yes. And thank you for becoming in that example that, these roadblocks can be overcome because you did it. And I know Bill listening in here can attest to that they too will be able to overcome because it has been done before. Now, what was your first major breakthrough that gave you that, perhaps assurance that you were on the right path?
The moment that it was like, oh my God, it was when we started sourcing, collecting data, in fact, of the results of our programs. So usually when you have a regular training, in fact, what happens is that traditional training companies measure the satisfaction survey. Well, companies, in fact, they don't pay for people that are going to be enjoying the training, but corporations, in fact, that they pay for a change of behaviors when people are actually practicing that. So, and this is what we wanted to start measuring. So, are people changing? Are people practicing what they learn? And even after the program is delivered. So imagine that usually in a traditional training, 2 months later, there is going to be approximately 11% of people who will remember the topic that they learned. And probably there will be around 5% of people who will be actually practicing part of what they learned. So, and when we started collecting data, we had like a representative sample of people, of users of our programs. So we noticed that after 2 months of training, there was actually 70% of people who were still practicing these behaviors that they learned back during the session 2 months after. So in no support or whatsoever, the session was finished and then they were still practicing. That was like a good moment for us. The other thing is that we also wanted to measure that what we call meta skills, supporting skills that are going to make people continue for the longer term, and in fact they are experiencing something that is a good personal change. So things like motivation, trust in their capabilities, the type of resilience, and also in that area that was not the core of the learning, people were into the more than 65% improving. In fact, in terms of the core index, which was a good thing. So when we compare with most of the solutions that are existing out there, we benchmark it and we were doing better than others. So that was a positive, like a breakthrough moment where you have enough data to go and share it with potential customers, and so that they start believing, because at the beginning it's a little bit tough to convince someone, hey, I'm using brain science for learning. What the hell does it mean? This is what they tell you, right?
That's awesome. That is incredible. How is the world, perhaps, in this area has changed or is different now than when you got started?
To answer this question, I wanted to refer to one research that was done by KPMG in 2021. They asked thousands of CEOs, in fact, what was the biggest threat for their business during that year. And they made the number one threat was the readiness of their leadership in order to drive change. And that brings us to the origin of the change. Something that has happened during our life is that COVID has affected the way people behave at work. And COVID has demonstrated that managers, people supervisors, were not able to cope with the change, the type of agility that it was required during that time, because many businesses had to rethink about their business model, to adapt to new situation. Employees were living in a moment of a lot of fear of losing their jobs. And other things that have happened is that during this time of COVID, there is the rise of Generation Z joining the workforce. And these guys, in fact, they have really a different view about what is expected in terms of the business culture, where they feel more that they need to have something that is more inclusive, where they need to be the capacity also to balance their life better. The importance of the financial, the perks that they receive at work is much more less compared to other generations. So attracting talent today depends quite a lot in the type of culture that companies have. The second thing is that many employees started quitting. So quitting the jobs too, because they understood that life is more than just work. There is options out there. People can work remotely. They prefer to have less income, but to have a better quality of life. They have different interests that were not fulfilled inside of their corporations, and that dissonance is, in fact, the smart word is cognitive dissonance between the values of the company and their personal values was more visible during the COVID time. So people have started reconsidering their jobs and leaving. And the third thing that has happened is that there is a phenomenon called presenteeism, where people goes to work, they're in front of the computer, but they are not as productive. I don't know, for the reasons of mental capacity, because they are not motivated and so on. And companies have recognized that this presenteeism is costing a lot of money for companies, because it represents millions and millions of dollars for companies. So COVID, in fact, has demonstrated that there was some flaws in terms of how managers are equipped to lead teams in a different manner, to have more agility, to be a little bit more empathetic. COVID has also demonstrated that companies needed to rework the work culture, in order to attract people and also to retain the current talent. So there is a lot of things that have changed in terms of the necessities in the workplace for a better and healthier workplace during COVID, during these last 2 to 3 years.
Things don't stay the same, do they? They keep changing. And I've discovered that the people who are quick to adapt to the situation are the ones that will stay in the business for a very, very long time. And the ones that wants to stay with the old system tends to be out of business in no time. I think of the blockbusters, the DVDs and the video, back in the time, they all went out of business. We don't know exactly the ins and out of that, but they were not very quickly to adopt and become very, flexible in accepting the new system or the new way of doing things. Therefore, if Bill, you're listening, you may want to look at how flexible you are when it comes to these things. While at it, I've just thought of something else. I was listening to one of my mentors a few years ago, and he said, in business, you have to be as fluid as water. The water flows, it follows the path of least resistance. It follows. You never find water flowing uphill. It's always downhill. And the concept he was trying to share with me there is, the world is changing. And whatever you're going through, whatever you're trying to build, look for that path of least resistance and go with that. If it means changing something, leaving a certain way, or leaving a certain aspect of your business, adopting a certain aspect of your business, you do that, you're going to, in a way, you'll be able to increase your chances of staying in business over a long period of time. I know I've wandered a little bit there, but I just felt it'll be applicable at this point, because it still works for me today. I always, in every situation, follow the path of least resistance. Let's talk about how can you get started fast in this area for those who are listening.
I guess that it is more important, rather than saying, let's start fast, it's more important to say how to start right. So if you want to start fast, in fact, it is quite easy to copy any business model of any traditional training company. But the problem is that today, the world is full of these traditional learning companies who are more or less selling the model of training a corporation by acquiring knowledge, which in fact is not exactly what is required in the world today. So if you want to be different, you want to have impact, you want to differentiate from the rest of the competition, I would say that it is important to acquire, to learn how to understand the human psychology. So corporations behave kind of like a human being. They have fears, they are motivated because they are made out of humans at the end. So, and in today's world, behavioral science has advanced so much that it's now easy to understand the correlation between areas of the brain that are activated when we feel engaged on something, immersed on something, when we want to develop skills in order to be motivated. It is now more accessible for any of us. So understanding behavioral science, understanding neuroscience is a must in order to be able to change behaviors in an organization. So you want to be a traditional training company, then start by copying, miming whatever traditional corporations and traditional training centers are doing, but you will have already a good, well-established competition. Now, if you want to really have impact, the use of psychology can help you out, in fact, to have more impact that is going to help you with differentiation. And I would say just something that I was almost forgetting. The use of technology today makes it possible to combine the good way of interacting in a human personalized manner with the scale that is necessary in order to transform full corporations. So there is a good opportunity if you want to start today.
I guess a lot of people, including me, of course, wants to know how long does it take to see real results, tangible results in this area, and perhaps how much commitment it takes, maybe on a daily or weekly basis, to begin to see results that we want. So perhaps, in your experience and in helping a lot of people, how long does it take really to see sizable results, something that we'll be proud of?
When we are combining, in fact, our programs is not a one-off program. It's like small chunks of deliveries, live deliveries with the use of an app in order to reinforce and track behaviors. So we usually within 5 weeks, it is possible to see behaviors that are established, that behaviors that are correlated to the skill that people have learned in a delivery session. And you see people that 95% of the people are practicing these behaviors, and in fact they have acquired. Let me tell you a little bit more about behaviors. So in order to be that people acquires behaviors, it needs to be kind of repetitive, and it has to be very small behaviors that you do like 1-2 minutes or even 5 minutes every single day, so that it becomes something like a reflex, and it becomes less of a friction of a big change in our human brain. When there is a big change in our human brain, the fact is that we release hormones that indicates fear. And when there is these hormones indicating fear in our brain, in fact, we lose motivation. It affects our motivation. So we need to kind of trick the brain in order to microdose, but doing it with consistency. So it is not about intensity. It's not about going to a program during one full day and yes, you are done. It's about doing consistently in small chunks, micro behaviors, so that these behaviors become repetitive and they become acquired. You don't think about it anymore. It becomes natural, and they trigger themselves in depending on the context. So in 5-6 weeks, we can have good sizable results. The majority of attendance in our interventions having changed their behaviors.
I couldn't resist asking this question I'm about to ask, because you've explained things so clearly, these steps, and how, and even touched on how long it takes, and it's very clear. But you and I know that not everybody is going to be doing what you just shared here. And in your experience, what stops most people from really doing what you've just talked about here? and how they can avoid those roadblocks, perhaps, so to speak, or those things that will steal their goal from them. Would you help us explore this for a moment?
I wanted to share with you a very funny story. In fact, this is a well-known fact about fitness centers that in the month of December, they are generating more than half of the revenues because a lot of people have the intentions about changing their lifestyle, have a healthier lifestyle, going to the gym. And what happens is that they go, and after 1 month, there will be already 50% of the subscriptions that are not going to be fully used. And after 2 months, it's close to 80% of the subscription that haven't been used. So in fact, the training centers are making a hell of a lot of money because people has the intention on the 31st of December to change something, and then they drop in their motivation, they go for a couple of sessions, they see that there is a lot of efforts to be done, and then they drop it. And after 2 months, there is only a few ones that are remaining using up their subscription. So, but this is natural. And in fact, it has happened to me and probably to you, Yeukai, also. It has happened that you want to have an intention in your life, and it's very difficult to hold it up. So what brain science or behavioral science tells you is that in order to change a behavior, you need 3 different things. One is a little bit of motivation, but it's not the key factor in order to change. Motivation is not enough to change. Second, define an action that is very small to be done, that doesn't take so much effort, neither time, in order to be done. So instead of, for instance, if I come back to the example of going to the gym or having a healthier lifestyle, instead of having a subscription, why don't you start doing 2 push-ups every single day? Who doesn't have time to do 2 push-ups? But the third thing that is also quite important is to have a trigger, something that is going to remind you to do the new action. Well, so all this to tell you that when you have the mental process to break down a big change that you want to do into smaller actions in order not to drive these our brain triggering fear and making us lose our motivation, or the brain doesn't like so much change or doesn't like efforts, and then we procrastinate and then we drop the thing. So it's about making the process in a consistent basis. So in most of cases, when you have it right, when you define the right action to be done, you have the right trigger, change happens. But it's almost like investing in the stock exchange. So it is about micro changes that every time it will give you the 0.5% more every single day, instead of expecting that you're going to change drastically with a peak of 6% or whatsoever. No, this time is about investment on the long term, but in a sustainable way, because it will happen. So your chances of dropping your goal or the action or creating the behavior that you want to achieve is lesser if you have the right process. And this is what we try to apply. So the more time you spend with people, helping them define their own processes, the higher chances of taking that of success in a population, in a cohort is higher. So it's very minimal the number of people who will drop out from the success, from reaching the success. When there is still, I don't know, between 5 to 8% of people who cannot get around creating this process because lack of discipline, or I don't know, sometimes lack of motivation, or you don't believe in the process, it is important to go around and having a very individualized discussion in order to help this person to define the roadblocks that prevents him to create the optimal process. So individualizing the discussion is something that helps quite a lot for the people who cannot succeed.
Awesome. That's really great. Given what you know about this, where are the big opportunities coming up, for anybody who's looking at and maybe thinking Is there an opportunity coming up? Would you explore based on what you know, what's happening in the industry right now?
There are three indicators that I would like to highlight. Today, more or less 60% of business transformation are failing, and this is because of the fact that business transformation is not about technology, training. It is more about how to drive an organization that can produce innovation, be motivated for the change. That's number one. Then there is the phenomena of the Great Resignation. Many talent decides to leave the jobs to become entrepreneurs. So it's becoming more difficult, in fact, to attract talent, especially that today, when people are looking for a job, they go to Glassdoor, they look at reviews, they want to understand the business culture that companies are having in order to decide where to go and work. And if they don't find the right thing, they prefer to earn less and have something that is more fulfilling for them. So the importance of purpose in life, having a balanced life, has become very critical. And all these elements are part of the culture. Third element that I wanted to mention is about CEOs claiming that leaders are not ready to manage in a situation where there is volatility, where there is a need of agility and a need of more empathy with employees. So these skills are not acquired. So for me, these three elements makes me think that we are only at the early stages of this development of more human-centric cultures, and that has become even more important than before. In the past, there was this name called change management, but change management was made in order to drive decisions from the top of management in order to be implemented all around the organization. When we are talking about human-centric cultures, we are talking about making the full number of employees part of this change, or in fact the catalyst of this change. The second thing of that, all the skills that are necessary in order to be more human-centric, it cannot be learned in a traditional way like an in-class training. It has to be with practice. So there is the size of the opportunity. It's almost like we are really at early stages, and my guess is that in the next 5 years, at least 60% of the industry is going to go into that direction of acquiring the skills and implementing them all across organizations. So the use of neuroscience in order to understand how organizations think and how the brain of the individuals processes change and that processes the adoption of all the different skills that are necessary, because at the end, it's not enough just to have like a bunch of values that is stuck in your website. It's about how to transform these values into real behaviors that are relatable, understood by the full organization, that they can quickly put them in practice. And in order to put it in practice, you need to have this mental process in order to transform values into behaviors. Technology will be necessary in order to scale. Measurements in place, because this time is not about the saying, hey, if people are satisfied, then we did a good training. No. It is about actions, behaviors that needs to be tracked, and progress that needs to be evaluated all across the organization. So neuroscience has changed quite drastically. We have more information about what is the correlation between chemicals, electrical signals of our brain, and the different aspects of what makes us do what we do or take certain decisions. So it is an area, science, that has become accessible. Now, using it for the good, to develop healthier corporate cultures, it is the right place to be today.
And who should pay particular attention in this area, because they stand to benefit the most?
if you go and make a survey to companies and you ask them, do you want to be more productive? Do you want to have a more engaged organization? Do you want to be able to attract more talent? Well, that makes that most of corporations are in the need of a healthier corporate culture, right? So, but if it was up to me and I had to pick and choose an organizations who have really the urgent need of having a corporate culture that is healthier, where people are really practicing and engage on the values related to behaviors, I would say that the most urgent companies are the ones who have toxic cultures, and that is quite easy. I mean, you go to Glassdoor, you check how people are rating you to understand a little bit more what people are not happy with. Because the good thing about this type of tools like going to Glassdoor is that you have the fresh information about why people are unhappy. So you can identify certain cultural traits of the corporations that are not working correctly. And I guess that if you really want to attract people and this information is visible out there, so you need really to make it in the top priority of your list. The second type of companies that I would say that is most urgent in terms of having healthier cultures at work is the ones transitioning into transforming their business model. For instance, the ones who are into full digitalization. So you don't want that things happen in one corner of the company and that the rest of the company do not benefit of the change that you are providing. So if you want to digitalize, you need to have the opportunity to enable the organization in order to that innovation grows like a type of guerrilla, like there is pockets of areas in all around your organization that are engaged into the change so that they can come with new ideas about how to change, and is driven not by the top management, but is driven by your organization. So enhancing, reinforcing behaviors of innovation. So any company going to full transformation, well, that's a good opportunity to change the cultural values and reassess how these cultural values can be represented with the right behaviors all across the organization.
I would be taking notes at that, because if I notice that I am going to benefit the most, I will do everything I can to make sure that I'm in line to receive that. Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the fastest way to succeed, and the best time to get started in this area, so that it becomes very clear and people can schedule, what they need to do right away.
One of the biggest urban legends, in fact, in terms of changing the culture in corporations, is that you need to have a big investment, that it needs to be like a big party to start the change, a lot of information, media, events in order to launch. Forget about that. I mean, if you want to launch to transform the culture in your organization, it can be started with very small actions. It doesn't need any big investment. So actions that I find quite critical in order to start the change is, for instance, creating the type of process that enables the organization to become more innovative and agile. So creating a process where people can voice out their concerns, things that do not make them happy, and things that can improve the business. But there needs to be a process for that. It cannot be just discussing with my supervisor. It needs to be something more tangible and that really enables to make the information available from the bottom of the organization up to the top. The second thing that is quite important is about the fact of that people want to be recognized the work they do. So we always believe that recognition happens during the appraisal reviews at the end of a year, once per year. But in fact, people are more motivated. And when I say motivated, I'm talking about intrinsic motivation. It's the one that comes from within when they are recognized on the spot. So they do something good, then their boss should say thank you to them in front of others. And they should be able to describe what they did right in order to, in fact, to become an example for others, and the people can mime these behaviors and it can disperse all across the organization. And maybe the third point is all the enabled of trust in the organization. So kind of like being more transparent in the good and all times, being more vulnerable, being a little bit more personal with people is not only about discussing work-related stuff, but being a little bit more empathetic and human-centric by asking them personal questions about how can they help them in their personal life, and having conversations that are more humans. And the cost of this is zero, guys. So there is no excuse to start now because it doesn't cost any money to do that. It just takes like a good decision that can be communicated across the organization.
Absolutely incredible. I'm certainly enjoying this conversation. Can I remind you, Bill, and everybody listening in today, that you can certainly ask any follow-up questions to any of the areas we are touching on here today in the community. I will be in there, the team will be in there, and everybody will be in there to support you. Coming back to you, let's talk about tools. Are there any special tools or training or equipment that will help through the process? We might as well talk about the kind of cost generally that people should expect to improve their skill set and for them to become what we are talking about here and capitalize on the opportunities that are ahead.
Think about the last time that you have learned something and you really liked the training because it was useful for whatever you wanted to achieve. So, and if we look at that, there is certain characteristics that the approach should have. One is that it is relatable, that it should be like relatable to your job, so not or and important for you. The second thing is about I can use it right away, that I don't have to wait too long time. That is something that is practical and I can practice on the spot. It is something that that generates insights that I have the time to process, to digest, and it's not something where, in 4, 5, 8 hours, I have got so much information and I have to sort it out and pick up what is important. So when things are relatable, and one last point, in fact, it is that I need to be able to say what I think in a risk-free environment. That means that I shouldn't be judged about trying and failing. I shouldn't be ashamed of doing that. So when you have these three elements, risk-free, relatable, and something that I can use, that is practical, I can use right away for my specific job, then this is the kind of things that makes people want to learn and continue practicing. So, and that's what we have tried to do with our approach. So you need to have a live session. So because it needs to be relatable, it needs to be a human. It cannot be just like an e-learning, for instance, has the disadvantage that you don't have feedback. And you need feedback when you are doing something to know if this is right or wrong. So it's not enough just to have an e-learning. It needs to be a live session where people are giving you feedback on what you do. The second part of the thing is that you need to have type of reinforcements, so the type of behaviors that you need to be practicing. So rather than teaching you how to do things, we give you the mental process in order to start finding the right behavior that you want to target, the one that gives you that maximize your return on investment, or whatever time you are investing in order to practice. And it needs to be easy to be implemented and repetitive, so that it becomes a reflex. And the third thing, you need like a system, like a platform that allows you to track not only that you are progressing, because it's good to know that you are progressing. That's an incentive for the brain in order to continue the behavior, and something that also tells you how far are you going in terms of repeating that behavior and making it better. So you need a software. So you need a mobile in order to access the software to track the new behavior and see how much you are progressing. You need to have a live session. And one last point, you also need like the human support. So Imagine you have a session, you are practicing, but you need to have feedback. So at any time, you should have the possibility to talk to the facilitator, even if it is not during the time of the delivery, in order to ask him questions, because questions do not come during the session. Questions come when you are really in putting it into practice. So three elements that are super important in order to make it happen. It's not rocket science, but it needs to have something that is validated by research in order to have results. You need to have data that this process works correctly. And for the good thing is that we have spent enough time in this industry in order to understand what could be the expectations in terms of change of either culture or acquiring new skills in an organization.
Incredible. And what kind of results can people expect if they do things right? And are these results typical, for anybody who is starting out, or even those who've been around for a while?
I want to mention a real case, in fact, here. One of our clients in the automobile industry, in fact, which has like employees around 30 different countries, they started a transition to reinvent their business model during COVID times. And the pain points that they had is that they had a very low level of engagement, which is understandable during COVID times. Of course, the sales of cars dropped significantly. They had an increased level of stress due to the uncertainty and low motivation for innovation. So in the times where they needed to have more innovation, in fact, employees were a little bit down in terms of this motivation. So we did a 2-month program for the full organization. So, and what I wanted to highlight in terms of results is that certain of the behaviors that were improved. So we had double digits growth in terms of agility, low stress, motivation, growth mindset. So the capacity in order to innovate and learn new things constantly, but not only in terms of the skills. So we correlated by the number of business outcomes that they were having, that we can correlate with real impactful things that brings the money. So we had an increase in terms of governance for innovations, with the innovation initiatives that had multiplied more than 10 times. The level of customer service rating increased by more than 15%. The number of sales closing increased by 10%. So we could correlate the impact of this program that was based on behavioral science to learn a certain number of skills that were related to their specific pain points. And we had like great results, not only in terms of acquiring new skills, but also in terms of business outcomes, which, believe me, that made us really happy.
Awesome. We're certainly coming toward the end of our time here together, but are there any other questions that business owners should be asking, regarding this now, or begin to think about asking, so that when they get into the community later on, they will be able to ask those questions?
I would say that no matter how good is your product or your service or your route to market, if you don't have your people engaged, you don't have the right healthy work culture, it cannot be sustainable. So you need to start thinking about what are the type of things that you need to do to implement in order to retain the good people that you have, and also how to attract the new generation of people, because they are a little bit more picky regarding the reasons to come and work for you. So they have they have choices, and they have a strong beliefs that they have more options than just working for financial perks.
Excellent. What final thoughts do you have to help motivate business owners to get started right now, or to take this subject we're talking about very, very seriously?
There has been like a major shift for corporations, in fact, from creating value for customers and shareholders towards creating value for employees, because they are the base of any innovation that can happen in an organization. And we hear more and more these words about purpose in organization, trust, and happiness of employees. And the reason is not like because it sounds beautiful to say it, or because it's good to have. It is because there has been many research that backs up the correlation between purpose, trust, and happiness of employees towards more productivity, more innovation, more engagement for employees, and more options to attract the right talent today. So there is not only beautiful words behind, there is real, factual, financial reasons in order to start working in better, healthier corporate cultures and start investing into learning journeys that really transform the behaviors of people and not just the knowledge of people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for a great interview and for your generosity in sharing what is working right now with everybody here. And I know there will be people wanting to connect with you or even carry on the discussion with you and find out more, perhaps want to work with you. Could you tell us a little about your website and how they can connect with you today?
Thank you. So if you want to connect with me, one of the quickest options is to go to LinkedIn and search for Ivan, Ivan Palomino. You can reach me out. I will connect with you and I answer most of the messages. Otherwise, you can go directly to my website, PeopleKult.com. Cult is KULT. And then there is, inside of the website, you will find an area where you can book a timing with me in Zoom, or you can just directly write to me via email. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You've just received a masterclass on this subject. And if you were to take one of those things applied today that you've discovered, you could see a tremendous change in what you're trying to do. As you know, success breeds success. And what I've discovered in my personal life is when I succeed in the very first step, my confidence goes up and I have got this courage and energy to implement the next step and the next step and the next step. And truly, over a period of time, I change, or I've moved from point A to point B, and I've changed my business. I've even changed my life. So I want to encourage you to go and implement what you've discovered today. And if you've got any questions, just go straight into the community to ask those questions. And I want to come back to you here for a moment. And I know that you will be participating in the group. Would you tell everybody how you're going to be helping the listener, those that may have any questions that are in the community moving forward? And when you have done that, we'll just conclude it there. And listen, ladies and gentlemen, go implement this stuff. Go implement this stuff. I can't emphasize that enough. Go implement it. And until next time, live well, live with passion. Know that the best is truly yet to come.
Thank you for listening to Yeukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yeukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.